Get 'em.
Welcome, folks. Y'all come on in and make yourself at home. This here, well, this is the Rolling Thunder Podcast, your home for all things Rolling Thunder. This episode is brought to you by Mossy Oak, because everything is better in Bottomland. Kent Cartridge, quality matters, performance counts. Shen Gear, waterfowl gear that is built better. And Benelli USA, dominate the skies.
Bottomland is Mossy Oak's original camo pattern created by Toxie Hayes over 3 decades ago. This pattern preserves the original design while applying advanced technology for increased effectiveness. The same field-proven components and colors, the same dirt and bark elements, the same ability to blend into dark environments and obscure a hunter's outline from every angle. Mossy Oak, Bottomland.
Welcome back to another episode of the Rolling Thunder Podcast.
Hey, buddy.
What's up, man?
Man, you know, just another day.
Living the dream.
Yep, just another day. It's Sarah's last day.
Yeah.
So we had ribs for lunch, but
it's opening day, Eve.
Yeah,
right now.
I didn't even think about that.
Yeah.
It is. You're right.
Yeah.
I guess I just assumed we weren't having turkey season in Tennessee this year. So far, it's killing me. All my friends are already traveling. They're like, what are you going to do the rest of April? I'm like, the rest of April?
What do you mean? Like, we ain't even started yet, man.
I know. I'm just going to stay here in Tennessee on it home. Man.
Well, what you got on the plate today?
Man, so this one's a little bit out of left field. No real major connections to the Rolling Thunder brand. I guess no real direct connections. Yeah. I should say major is not a good word because there are some major connections, but direct connections. So a good friend of mine is Jason Hart, who has been a big fan of our brand for a long time, been on the podcast several times, and he is one of the founders of the Hook and Nomad brands. Has worked at Mossy Oak for quite a long time, a couple different stints at Mossy Oak, and he's currently the director of community marketing for Mossy Oak, which is a lot of pro staff involvement, and it's a lot of the stuff that Tim Anderson did before his death. But anyways, Hart, as long as I've known Hart, he has told stories about this guy named Guthrie, James Gutherie, and I never knew him. He passed away 10 years ago yesterday, and he was just a larger than life kind of a cat. And I've always heard these stories. And yesterday in our group text, Hart sent a picture of a gobbler that he killed that morning, and he had a picture of Guthrie with him. And he said 10 years to the morning that I woke up and found out that Guthrie had passed. And the more I thought about it, last night I was when I had gotten home from baseball and all the things, I was going back through my phone and just reading some of the messages from that group message I hadn't had a chance to that day, and it just kind of got to thinking about it. I was like, you know what? That's a guy I really would like to know some more about. And so I shot a text message over to Hart, and I said, hey, would you be up for a podcast about Guthrie tomorrow? And he was like, absolutely. And he said, how would you feel about me getting a few of my industry friends that knew Guthrie to join us? And I said, absolutely.
Yeah.
And, so one thing led to another, and the call that you're about to hear is a conversation that we just had a few minutes ago with Jason Hart of Mossy Oak and Mike Schoby of Field Ethos Journal. And these guys are just going to tell us all about Guthrie.
Yep.
And so I hope that all of our listeners will enjoy this episode. I hope that you pick up on some things that Guthrie, some talents that he had and some ways that he lived his life that, make you a better businessman, better just human. I know for me personally, listening to this has just really, really challenged me in several ways, one of which is just being very present and caring about other people when they're telling stories. And as simple as that sounds, that is so difficult in our job because we hear so many stories, so many hey, let me show you this. I killed 4 gadwalls and 2 wood ducks yesterday. And, I don't mean that from a snotty standpoint, but when it's part of our job and we hunt all the time, it's hard. It's just difficult in a moment of stress and, busy environment to stop and pay attention to somebody and listen to them and make them feel important. And you don't intentionally do it to harm them or to hurt their feelings, but man, that's one of those things that's really challenging. And anyways, you're going to hear some really cool stories in this one. And I hope that, the memory and the stories of James Gutherie live on for, many years to come.
And it's not only that be intentional with how you interact with people, but be intentional with your work. Because once we found out from Hart and Schoby how meticulous he was at his job, which in turn evolved him to be
such an influential guy in the
an amazing
industry.
Outdoor rider.
Yeah.
And just really his work ethic elevated him to the position that
you can see why from the stories they tell in this interview, you'll be able to see why all of the different manufacturers thought so highly of him, because he did such a good job of his job. And as simple as that sounds, man, we live in a world where, it's just too okay to half-ass things.
Yep, absolutely.
And we've sort of, as Americans, we've learned to accept, corrupt politicians and, cheap crap from China that breaks and just all the things. It's like we live in a world where it's okay to not be, not go the extra mile, not be what you advertise to be. And I think it's pretty cool in this one. You'll hear, just some firsthand accounts of how exceptionally well Guthrie went about his work and how well he was thought of. So
absolutely.
Without any further ado, here's an interview with Jason Hart and Mike Schoby about our friend James Gutherie.
Well, welcome back to another episode of the Rolling Thunder podcast.
What's going on, buddy?
We just had a fantastic lunch on the front porch, so
it was amazing.
Don't really have a whole lot to complain about. But
no doubt. About to be some siestas around our place, I'm afraid.
Smokehouse Blackwood threw down for us for lunch. So
there was lots of talk about all the things everybody was going to get done after lunch, and I rolled my eyes and was like, yeah, right. I know exactly what's going to happen.
Yeah,
we're going to podcast, and y'all are going to crash on the front porch. We're going to walk out and look like sleeping with the dwarves,
like a bunch of union workers out there.
Yeah, exactly. Well, look, on today's episode, we've got a couple of guests. One we know and one we don't know. We are joined by Jason Hart. What is your official title, Hart?
Let's see here. I am the Director of Community Marketing at Mossy Oak.
Director of Community Marketing, which means you make all of the difficult phone calls and keep everybody happy across the country, right?
Yes, I'm the one that people come to when they're looking for money, and I'm the mean guy that gets to tell them no.
Well, and you have roped in a colleague of yours from days gone by. My understanding is your name is Mike Schoby, correct?
That is correct, sir.
Mike, tell us what you do and where you're at, and give us a little intro on yourself.
Sure. Now, I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Field Ethos, which is a multimedia conglomerate, if you will, magazine, print, digital, social, podcasts, television series. So all kinds of outdoor media, co-founded by Don Trump Jr.
Awesome. Good deal. Well, last night, just a little bit of background info. Last night I was sitting around and doing the typical late night scroll your phone while you can't find anything to stream on television as you're trying to fall asleep. And I was reading back through a group text message that Hart and I are both a part of. And I was reading some comments about a friend of Hart's and a bunch of people who, I guess 10 years ago yesterday, passed away. And I shot Hart a text message, and I was like, will you get on a podcast tomorrow and tell us about this legendary character named Guthrie, who I did not have the benefit of knowing personally, but so many people that I know, like Jason, thought the world of him, and I've heard Guthrie stories forever. And so just kind of as an intro here, I want you guys to tell us who Guthrie was, what he meant to you, and kind of give us the whole story. What did he do? And, so go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll go ahead and get my start. And, for the record, I brought Mike Schoby on here. Schoby and I became friends through Guthrie because he was Schoby was Guthrie's last boss and his boss when he passed away. But I met James Gutherie, who his pen name was Jay because he hated his first birth name, James. And anybody that was friends with him referred to him as Guthrie. And if somebody referred to him in Jay, he probably wasn't very close buddies with him. He was just business associates.
I knew there was something going there because I Googled, the what was it, the Rod and Gun or Gun and Guns and Ammo article and a few other things, and everywhere it was printed, it was J. Guthrie. So that was going to be one of my first questions.
Well, he started that when he went to work for the Quality Deer Management Association back in 2004. And that's how we met each other. We went to work and we met at Millery Plantation in, I believe it was July 2001. And we were working for the startup nonprofit, the QDMA, the Quality Deer Management Association. I was in charge of fundraising initiatives and starting banquets and chapters. And I was a pseudo deer biologist at the time. And Guthrie was the new editor of the magazine, Quality Whitetails. And literally, we met that day, and we had lunch the first day of work. He's like, "Hey, man, I don't know anybody here in Athens, Georgia. You want to be my roommate?" So I very reluctantly, my first impressions of this guy was he was a tall, skinny, white version of Chris Rock, very loud and obnoxious, very redneck, and constantly popping corny jokes that for some reason everybody really liked. And when we first moved together, when we first became co-workers and roommates, I pretty much thought of him as literally a Georgia complete redneck, and I think he thought of me as a South Carolina frat boy, preppy boy. And at first we didn't get along, and one thing led to another. We became roommates. We became co-workers over the next 3.5 years, and lived in Athens, Georgia together, and then became really close buddies and became hunting buddies. And he had previously worked for the Georgia Outdoor News, which in the state of Georgia is their really premier hunting magazine. Yeah. So he had a lot of experience in that. He was trained as his education was in English, and in writing he wrote for local newspapers, but he grew up hunting and fishing and trapping and became a big fan of guns, a big fan of war history. He was a history buff and literally was quite a man of all trades, if you will. During our QDMA days, he became somewhat of an expert in the world of white-tailed deer, and then he moved on to the National Rifle Association in Virginia. And he was living in Northern Virginia, wearing a camouflage ball cap, but they made him wear a tie to work every day. And and at the time, he was a gun expert, but then he really honed in his expertise in the gun world during that time. And both of us were in our early 20s at the time, and both of us were single men, and both of us were pretty wild. And so, long story short, we hung out together at trade shows. We hung out in hunting camps, and we hung out at bars, and we made a point to get together, and our friends network grew tremendously during that time. And with that being said, Guthrie moved on from the NRA. He got fired from the NRA, crazy enough, because he was going on a hunting trip to King Ranch in Texas with me through a mutual friend, and he turned in his paperwork, and when he got back, his boss said, "You didn't follow proper procedure." He said, "Well, I'm going anyway." Before he left, and he came back, got fired. He's like, "Well, I don't know what I'm going to do now. I guess I'm going to become a freelance writer." And next thing you know, he's writing for Field and Stream and Outdoor Life. And next thing you know, he's hosting television shows and has the back cover of Guns and Ammo magazine, and is working for OSG and writing for the big. So literally, because of one very odd boss who did not quite like his demeanor, he ended up creating an incredible career for him outside of the NRA before his death happened. And in 2013. But anyhow, with that being said, I'll let Schoby get started. But needless to say, he is not only known for his work and his writing abilities, but he was quite the character outside of hunting and outside of shooting sports. And then with that being said, he was an absolutely all around, very rounded outdoorsman and was an expert in many, many different fields, from turkey hunting to deer biology to muzzle loading to optics to modern rifles to long range shooting to ballistics to military ballistics to literally wing shooting to you name it. He was quite knowledgeable in all of them. And I'll let Schoby kind of go from there. How he got to meet him.
Sounds like he was a hell of a wingman.
Yes, well, he was. Yeah, he was quite the fun guy to be a part of, and I probably out of all of those, he was quite the storyteller.
It's funny, Hart. I've known you for 15 years, and accurately so, through Guthrie, but I never realized you had a biology degree. Did you have a degree, or were you just the biologist there?
No, I did. I went off to Clemson University, and I thought I was going to be a wildlife biologist at one time in my life. When I grew up hunting, and guidance counselors tell you that you need to get into something you like. They don't tell you that you need to make money if you really want to go to end up doing something you like. So I followed that path to wildlife biology, and as an 18-year-old kid, I didn't know. I didn't realize that a wildlife biologist made less than a financial advisor, even though the cost of going to Clemson University at the time was exactly the same, no matter what major you got in. And yeah, I majored in why I thought I was going to be a deer and turkey biologist. And I went off to Clemson University and realized I wasn't very good at statistics. And then all of a sudden I realized when I got in the real world that wildlife biologists with undergraduate degrees really don't make a lot of money. And if you want to have fun, you kind of got to make some money. So I did not follow my pursuit of, I wasn't smart enough to get advanced degrees, which would accelerate you in the field of wildlife biology. So yeah.
So you're more than just a pretty face then. You actually got some brains.
Well, no, I don't know if I'd say that, Schoby. I think most of them got spent at Clemson University after.
Scobie, don't you remember the Matrix?
The hot crazy Matrix.
Yeah,
I do.
Yeah, go ahead, Scobie.
I was just thinking when you were talking about Guth, I honestly can't recall when we first met. I came on as the editor-in-chief of Peterson's Hunting when I was, late 30s, and just so Guth was a couple years younger than I was, and probably met him at one of our OSG roundtables the first year I was there. We'd host an annual roundtable with all the manufacturers of the products, and testing them and shooting them for a week at a remote retreat. Did that twice a year, and we just hit it off. From the earliest time. It's hard not to. I guess that's and you're talking about him. He had the ability just to light up a room. I mean, anybody that knew him, had the pleasure of knowing him. You'd walk into a room and he would be holding court. I mean, just everybody, man, woman, and child, hung on his every word. And I like everybody else, quickly gravitated towards him. And that developed into, obviously, we had a lot of shared interests and loves, and both inside the industry and outside the industry. And we just really hit it off and became very close, through a working relationship. And he became one of my prime writers. And in fact, I've been a freelance writer and editor, managing editor, editor-in-chief, publisher for 30 years now, and I've not seen the quality of writing. He was the preeminent outdoor writer of our time, by far. He was the best writer that worked in the OSG stables, and I would stack him against anybody at Field and Stream, Outdoor Life, or any mainstream publication. But he was a horrible procrastinator. I mean, I had to ride him like a wet diaper, and you'd call him up and, hey, Guthrie, you're too. And I got to where I could manage him, being that if I needed an article due May 1st, I would tell him it'd be April 1st. And by, mid-April, I'd start calling him, hey, you're 2 weeks late. Where's that article? Man, you ain't going to believe it. A big old oak tree came down across the power lines today and took my internet out. And, he called back a week later. Yeah, no, a dog actually came in and chewed my computer up. And, I don't know what to say. I'll get it to you tomorrow, though. And tomorrow would come and go, and call him back up, and he'd have another excuse of why it didn't get done. And generally you'd hear gunfire in the background. You could tell damn well he was at the range, shooting, not writing. And then when he set himself down to actually write, and he turned something in, and it would be on time because I told him it was a month late. It was the best thing he ever had. And so it's why he was successful. He was so talented as a writer and a communicator and a storyteller and just a natural wordsmith that really, really had an exceptional talent.
Just for a tiny bit of background knowledge, Hart, you made a comment the other day when we were all together that there have kind of been these variations of rock stars in the outdoor industry, and current day with social media, it's the influencers, right? And at one point it was TV show hosts and writers. And I know that there is significant value to the written word, but writers today are not the rock stars that they were of a certain time ago. Will you unpack that just a little bit? Like, tell us what writers, y'all are talking about these meetings and stuff, and I know what you're talking about, but give our listeners a little background knowledge.
From my standpoint, in the sales and marketing side, in the hunting industry for the last 23 years, and Schoby may have a different perspective, but I know when I was growing up, I would read all the different magazines, and for me that was Deer and Deer Hunting and North American Whitetail and Outdoor Life and Field and Stream, and then on the turkey hunting side, Turkey and Turkey Hunting and Turkey Call magazine, and you would see all the same faces and the same pictures and in these magazine articles, and they would be, they may be back in the 90s, it might have been someone that owned a call company or somebody that worked at PR for a call company, and you'd see all these pictures of these writers, and it was almost like they were the celebrities. And at the time, companies were spending a ton of money in it, and to this day, in particular in the gun field, they still are doing so. But back in those days, it was the folks that there were people that companies had on retainer just to wear the certain camouflage or a certain brand, and these writers would only wear that, and they were getting taken all around the world. And
the writers themselves had sponsorships outside of their writing obligations.
Yes,
crazy?
Absolutely, to be exclusive to certain brands. And then in the 2000s, that's when the outdoor television really took off. It moved from VHS and cable into satellite, and DVDs started hitting the market. And now all of a sudden there was a lot of television celebrities and folks that were getting big sponsorships. And now it seems like the entire industry has moved to influencers now, to where, different influencers are getting money and getting sponsorships and things like that. But Guthrie came about at about the time where the writers in the outdoor industry were still the absolute rock stars. And then as that moved on, Guthrie, I remember him calling me one day. He was on a television show. He was on Guns and Ammo TV, and then he was on a TV show called Modern Rifle Adventures on Sportsman's Channel. And he's like, man, I don't know what it is, but something about this TV, I think I've got it. And then all of a sudden, he went from being well known in the industry from his outdoor writing skills, and folks were flying him all over the world to have him and Schoby experience much of the same for his writing. That moved into him hosting the television show, and now it was pretty neat to see him walk around SHOT Show being the celebrity status, moving from from an outdoor writer to being a television personality. And I remember we were at SHOT Show, one of his last SHOT shows, and he's like, Hart, you ain't believe this. He said, Pigman walked up to me at the show, and he knows me and said he likes my show. I can't believe it. He's like one of those celebrity types. So anyhow, he was very humble about that. But he was definitely, you walk up and down the SHOT Show, it didn't take but a few years, and everybody knew the skinny Georgia redneck's name for sure.
And that's the thing about a writer. I mean, they still have clout. Well, I shouldn't say that. Not a clout. They still are a good medium for communicating, to your point, Hart, a gun industry's marketing message or giving a gun review. But nobody ever knows a writer. You just don't. You don't have a mental image of them, so you can read a guy's name 1,000 times and you would not ever pick up Guthrie on the street. You wouldn't recognize him. But TV and now today social media has changed all that, right? Where people put a name with a face. And we've seen that evolution between writing to TV to social media. And now, interestingly enough, I mean, we're, with our Field Ethos company, our magazine, our print magazine is, really gaining a lot of traction because I think people have come full circle, and that next generation of younger kids are, kind of gravitating or finding, something that was retro cool in 1980, and it's kind of making a full circle back, especially as people start getting out of TV more and more. And, there's so many more options for people to watch. But yeah, no, Guthrie became very, very popular and very recognizable. And he had a certain look about him. He always had that ball cap on and always matched. You can tell how much he'd been drinking at SHOT Show, depending on how high that ball cap was on his head. He would warn that ball cap would be all the way down about there, and you couldn't hardly see his eyes, and he'd be swing dancing somewhere.
Man, I haven't thought about that, but the early 2000s, we all put rubber bands and tennis balls around those hats because you wanted it to be tight.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some of those pictures I sent you, Schoby, you can tell that's how he wore it, and yeah, it was funny. That was his look at the NRA. When he worked for the NRA, the NRA required everybody to wear a shirt and a tie, and there was Guthrie. He'd be out. As soon as he'd walk out of the door, he'd put his camo hat on with a shirt and tie to go to lunch. So he made quite the name for himself in Northern Virginia. And at the time, I was living in Baltimore, Maryland, working for Under Armour. And Guthrie became quite the when he would come up to Baltimore to visit, and we'd go bar hopping in Baltimore with my Under Armour coworkers. He became quite well known in the streets of Maryland as well up there for some of his interesting antics.
I love how he used to refer to it. Well, and it's funny you said the White Chris Rock, because that's what I've always thought of him as the White Chris. He sounded like
he has the accent of Chris Rock. He had the accent of Chris Rock. He had the build of Chris Rock and had the smile of Chris Rock. He just had white skin, but it was quite the and he appreciated that analogy. He could mimic Chris Rock pretty well, in particular the dirtier of jokes that Chris Rock told.
I remember, I think one of the first times I met him, Hart, he came up to me, and he would always do the gentlemanly, take his hat off and shake your hand, and he goes, "Jay Guthrie, Maconga." I said, "Where are you from?" He goes, "Maconga." I go, "Maconga?" He goes, "Macon, Georgia." Maconga.
That's great.
That's funny.
What would Guthrie be doing right now if he was still active part of our industry?
Killing turkeys right now.
Yeah, he'd probably be in turkey camp with me right now. But no, I've thought about that a lot. He, at the time of his death, and you might be able to get into this a little bit more, Schoby. He was awarded the back page of Guns and Ammo magazine, which is basically was Jeff Cooper made popular. Which, in all honesty, and Schoby, you can speak to that more. That is kind of the highest level honor of any writer, to have that back page of Guns and Ammo magazine, which means you are the best gun writer out there. So he was super well respected amongst the ballistic industry, super well respected amongst the gun industry. And when I say the gun industry, that's everything from handguns to, long range long range bolt action rifles to lever action to, some of the pictures, handguns. You name it, optics. He was an optics editor at one time. So there was just every different aspect of anything to do with firearms. He was well known.
Respected too by everybody from the guy at the, Ruger shop floor to the CEO who he'd have dinner with. Every single level of a corporation in the gun industry had an affection and love for Guthrie. And, I don't know, writers, like all creative types, and I wrote this in his obituary for Peterson's Hunting, are catty. You'll never hear them give compliments or praise to other writers. They always feel their work, and that's probably true of television hosts and Instagram influencers and everything else, but it's such a competitive world that they don't hand out compliments very freely, and generally very catty. If you're sitting around camp, it's a conversation. That guy's an asshat and he can't write worth a shit, doesn't know what he's talking about. And you never heard that about Guthrie. If his name came up in conversation, it was always with deference, respect, appreciation. I've never heard a bad word about his personal or professional ability. He's just well respected even by his peers.
That's remarkable.
Absolutely. To answer your question, Spence, I think that definitely he would have evolved to the digital world. he was a man that understood the changes and evolutions, and there'd be no doubt that he would have figured out his way to become a social media influencer at some capacity, because on top of all of that, he was a super talented photographer. When we worked for Quality Deer Management, he would do weddings on the side. He would do professional photography and bird photography. And yeah, he was quite the content creator before that word really existed. So, from video to photography. And that was one thing I get compliments to this day about a lot of my turkey pictures that I take, mainly, from that. And that was Guthrie's thing, is he said, man, he goes, everybody hates taking pictures of the trophies, but they last a damn lifetime.
They do.
You would kill something and Guthrie was in camp, it was going to be an hour-long photo shoot at the end. He taught a lot of us and taught me just a lot of, basics about photography. And that's what he was so good at. And it was funny. I remember when he went to work for NRA, one of his first hunts he got sent on was a mule deer hunt down in New Mexico. Killed this fine mule deer, and he always wore sunglasses when he was outside, and he took his picture with sunglasses, and one of his editors chewed him out. He called me up. He goes, I got bitched out on my first assignment for wearing sunglasses. He goes, I guess I'm going to have to clean up. He goes, I don't like being the one in front of the camera. I like being behind it. But no, no doubt about he would probably, be, I'd imagine he'd probably be working for Schoby right now, truthfully.
He would have been my first pick if coming over to Field Ethos.
Well, knowing the politically incorrect medium that you're working with, it would have fit him very well, because he was not scared in a crowd of people, a business dinner at SHOT Show, being very stuffy to speak his mind, and the Georgia redneck never left him. But when it came down to talk serious business, you quickly realize that he had quite the he had a lot going on in between his two ears. So,
yep, yeah, he did. I forgot how much hunting he did. We all were doing a lot back then. When I was at Peterson's, I was traveling 220, 250 days a year on incredible hunting trips around the world. And I forgot how much Guthrie did until he sent those photos over. He really had a lot of the guys of that era had a good repertoire of hunting, but boy, he did a lot of hunting,
No, he did. Turkey hunting was his passion, but Africa became his passion. Elk hunting became his passion. Squirrel hunting. He loved squirrel hunting more than anything. Quail hunting, dove hunting, duck hunting, goose hunting. I mean, you name it. And I was very fortunate. I got to tag along on a few of his assignments, which were basically hunts that he arranged that would cost no money, that he would get assigned. And there was one time on King Ranch, I remember we were down there on just a fun trip, and the plan was to shoot hogs. And then when we were shooting hogs, he made me want to shoot them. We wanted me to shoot them facing me so that he could dissect the animal to report back to Hornady on the terminal performance of these various bullets. And then he ended up, and this is, I don't know how well public knowledge this is, but he was also doing consulting for a very large company that was reporting to the United States military on terminal performance of bullets. So he was doing a lot of things in the world of ballistics, and the world of and one thing that he was ridiculously meticulous as Schoby said he was a procrastinator, but one thing he was uber organized. And he and I as roommates were completely different, because I had stuff everywhere all over the house, and his room was perfectly meticulous. And one thing that he did was he had quite the gun collection, and for every single gun he owned, he had every shot recorded, and he would have that written down, meaning every single round he ever fired from any gun, he had it written down, what it was fired, how far the distance was, what type of conditions, and everything. I mean, he was meticulous, and that's one of the reasons he got so many assignments, and so many of these gun and ammo and bullet manufacturers liked him, is because
went the extra mile.
No, he was a data He was absolutely a database of knowledge when it came to it. And he can, he told me, one of my favorite weekends with him was I was fortunate enough to go on a work hunt on a Dall sheep hunt. And so he helped line up a rifle. He got Nosler to loan me a rifle for the trip, and he got them to get the ammo. And then Leupold, he lined up a Leupold scope for me. He got tally rings and bases for me. He goes, all right, man, I need you to fly to Mobile, Alabama. We're going to go to my long range course, and I'm going to do my best to teach you how to long range shoot before this sheep hunt, because I don't want you going up there and screwing up. And sure enough, we went down there and we shot that rifle through a chronograph, and we adjusted the turrets on this. And he was doing this. This was in 2011.
Long before it was popular.
Long before. I didn't know anything about this. I was, my deer rifle. There
was ballistic apps and all the technology.
He was so well before his time with all of that. And in particular, modern rifles. He was the host of Modern Rifle Adventure Television, which on my post last night, I put some of the outtakes and the bloopers. He did that TV show with a gentleman by the name of Dick Metcalf, and he was kind of the old crusty guy, and Guthrie was the new young up and coming whippersnapper. But what Guthrie was doing to promote the AR-15 platform back in the early 2000s was amazing. He was one of the first AR guys that was out there before that craze got started. And he was, doing the long range ballistic, calculators and the turrets, right when they were first coming out and becoming popular and moving from military to the modern commercial sporting time. And,
isn't that
there's
crazy?
no doubt in my mind that all the advances in the shooting sports industry, he would have been on the absolute tip of the spear in the last 10 years.
And you can see the ramifications of that, how they filtered down through the industry since since he left us.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's wild.
Absolutely.
I would have never known that.
And, it's interesting, Hart. I was just thinking about this, that he was such a broad depth of interest, not only in the things he pursued, like you were just talking about, and what he was passionate about, but even when it came to firearms, he was on the cutting edge of, long range shooting and ARs and, all the modern technology. But I think one of the last things I spoke to him about before he passed was, I can't remember if he just took delivery of it or had it custom made. It was being worked on. It was like a 32 caliber flintlock squirrel rifle that he just wanted to start hunting squirrels with a flintlock. Did he ever get that gun?
Oh yeah, no, he was all into it. I've got one of his first articles, I believe he wrote for one of his first articles after he had left NRA was about that. He was all about shooting flintlocks. I mean, going back to that and just really, the diversity in his guns and, from turkey guns. He was, one of the first ones to pattern turkey guns that I knew, that patterns it the modern way as opposed to just, shooting it at, 30 yards and counting pellets in the head and neck. It was nothing like that. He knew every, single aspect about his guns. And, I was given by the family one of his turkey guns, kind of his favorite turkey gun, and it showed up in a box, and it had been, it had been dipped in aftermarket work, and every single thing in that box was perfect. The instruction manual was laid there perfect next to the screw and cap, and it was all in the original plastic. And I mean, just everything of that nature. He didn't throw his guns in a closet like I did and beat them up. I mean, he took meticulous care of them. And,
that's the gun that you killed your last one for 49 with.
I did.
Correct?
Yeah, I did. Absolutely. That is. So
that's such a cool story.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that whole story started, Guthrie loved turkey hunting. I love turkey hunting. And that was probably our, we liked all kinds of hunting. We'd shoot hogs together, and we went to Argentina together and shooting doves, and we hunted together, and, we hunted geese on the Eastern Shore together, and we deer hunted at our buddy Dr. Fred's, and hog hunted down at King Ranch, and we got a chance to hunt all over the country together. But turkey hunting was our biggest passion that we got to do together. And our first birds we killed together. We were very much like brothers in fighting, and we were in Kansas together, and we were set up on these birds, and I was calling them, and Guthrie wanted to make a move and run down the ditch line to them. And I'm like, no, Guthrie, we need to stay here and call. He goes, no, we're not. We need to get up there. I was like, Guthrie, we're going to set our ass down right here and call these birds. He goes, well, my little skinny ass is going to run down this ditch and crawl up and kill them, and you can sit there and wait if you want to. And I was like, damn it, Guthrie. Well, I followed him, and sure enough, we doubled up. And we're standing over there with two top of long beards, and I'm like, man, he's like, well, sorry I got on you hard. I was like, well, I'm sorry too, Guthrie. You know, we got in a little argument, and you know, at that time, he said, I said, man, he goes, that's my first bird in Kansas. I said, that's my first bird in Kansas as well. And I think that was my 7th state that I had shot a turkey in, and I think it was his 9th. And at that time, he mentioned, he goes, man, wouldn't it be cool to shoot one in every state? Which, you know, ultimately Guthrie's death is what led me to pursue that dream, and probably that comment standing over those turkeys in Kansas is what led to me, you know, ended up finally killing a turkey in all 49 states. And it was definitely dedicated to him, but that's when that whole moment came about. So it was definitely fitting that I killed my last turkey in my quest with his shotgun. So
that's too cool.
And it was quite the long shot. It was one that I'm not going to advertise on any form of media how long that shot was, but it was not one that I would encourage any of the listeners to take a shot that far, and I'm not going to tell you how far it was.
Well,
yeah, I think about that. You know, the year after he passed, it was his idea, his and my idea. I hosted a little series of shows called Border to Border, which was Guth and I hatched that plan, kind of like your 49 states, or his idea to hunt them in every state. Where we were going to drive from the Mexican border all the way to Alaska and hunt and fish every state we crossed off the Continental Divide, and take like 2 months doing it, like a typical boondoggle event. You know, I figured out a way we could do this fun trip and get it paid for and do it for work and get, you know, make a TV series out of it. And then he passed away before that show was to kick off that fall. And so I ended up doing it by myself. And it would have been a lot better product with him involved in it. You know, he would have really added a lot to the comedy of that, as well as the killing and the camaraderie in camp, for sure.
What's something that you guys carry with you every day, just either a memory or an impact that he made on you that changes how you work or live, or, you know, a lasting effect?
Well, I can speak to that somewhat. I mean, every day in the industry, I have industry contacts that I've met that were literally a direct connection through Guthrie. For example, quick one was Pete Angle. Pete Angle and I was somebody he introduced that Guthrie met his first day of work in NRA. I ended up befriending Pete. Pete ended up becoming the working for Under Armour. I got him a job there. Pete ended up becoming the president I co-founded at Hook and Nomad. If it weren't for Guthrie, I would have never met him. I'm on text message threads of every day with Guthrie's college roommate, with his high school buddy, with numerous people in the industry throughout my career. When we started the Hook and Nomad brand, and I needed somebody to help us with media relations, the first person I went to was Chris Ellis. It was somebody Guthrie introduced me to. So, you know, my network in the sales and marketing side was pretty diverse at the time, and his network on the writer and the media side was in, you know, for example, Schoby right here. I wouldn't have known Schoby without him, or my buddy Jeff Johnston, who now works for Schoby, and just so many connections that he had through the industry. And, you know, ultimately some of the people that he introduced went on to form, you know, monster companies, which has created, you know, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of revenue through the hunting industry that were literally made through connections he made. So it's, you know, he was quite the networker, and everybody, he had a vast array of like Schoby said, you know, when I went to work at Sierra and Barnes as the vice president of sales for Sierra and Barnes Bolts and Ammo, you know, a lot of the connections that Guthrie introduced me to, I ended up acquiring meetings just because they knew that I was buddies with him and spoke at his funeral, just because he was that kind of a guy that everybody trusted him. Everybody knew him. Yeah, he was a character, and with some brown water at night, he'd raise hell, and he'd get on the dance floor and cut a fool and cut a rug and, you know, tell some crazy stories. But with that being said, when it came to business and when it came to our industry, no matter what he did, he was super respected.
No, I would agree with you. That's, you know, the connections he made is a big thing I do carry with me today. Your friendship is one of them, but also, he was one of those rare individuals. He had two traits about him that I think probably made him endearing. One was he made you feel like he was your best buddy, the most important guy in the room, and he did that to everybody. He was not a brown noser or not. He just had an attentive attitude about him that made people just immediately like him and really feel, flattered by him, if you will. And so I've always kind of remembered that, like going, I don't have that ability. Very few people do. I just do it naturally, to do it where you're not working at it. And but I've always tried to strive to do that better, right? Where you go, God, how can you make somebody else feel good about themselves or really be honestly interested in what they're telling you about a hunt or their life or their family? He always had that ability to do just very, very naturally.
That is really hard especially in our industry, because every person that comes up and talks to you wants to tell you about their exploits, and not to grandstand, but if you're like us and you get to live this lifestyle, you know what I mean? It's rare that somebody comes up and tells you something you hadn't done 100 times, and so it's hard to keep
Michael
that attitude.
Waddell has that trait as well, which
He does.
is probably lending to
You're
his
right.
popularity. I used to work heavily with Waddell in a previous life, and we traveled a lot together. People would come up to him in a Waffle House or whatever, recognize him and say, "Oh, you're Michael Waddell. Man, I killed a squirrel the other day." And Michael would sit there and go, that's awesome, man. Good on you. And to me, I would just sit there going, I'm getting so tired of this, And I was just there as a bystander. Nobody was ever talking to me, didn't recognize who I was. And it drove me up the wall when people would come up and just start talking to you about hunting stories, because it happens so frequently. I mean, you could not get through a restaurant in the South. You couldn't get through SHOT Show with Waddell, but he was honestly interested in people's stories. And Guthrie had that same trait, which I think makes them both really well liked. They always had time for somebody, So, kind of a funny side story. Guthrie never spoke ill of hardly anybody. He did not really have people he did not like, but there was one gentleman in particular that I won't say his name, but Guthrie absolutely hated him. I mean, just the guy had screwed him in business and was just a real backstabbing piece of work. And Guthrie confided in me several times how much he disliked this guy. And sure enough, at the funeral, this guy was there, and he was just heartbroken over Guthrie's death, like everybody was. And he said, man, he was like a best friend to me, one of my best friends. And I'm just thinking, he couldn't stand you. But Guthrie never, ever projected that. That guy never knew Guthrie could not stand him.
Wow. So, that's high praise.
I was fixing to say, that's very admirable.
I do have a funny story that was one of Guthrie's late night antics when he was the editor of Quality Whitetails. He was getting ready to leave Quality Whitetails and go to work for the National Rifle Association. And I think that first job, he was going to be the editor of American Hunter. And, he was an incredible editor of the magazine. And during our time at QDMA grew from 8,000 members to about 40,000 members and became a lot bigger deal in the world of the whitetail deer. And we had, representing QDMA and writing for QDMA, without a doubt, the best whitetail deer minds in the field of biology. Well, we were in a national convention in, I believe it was Lafayette, Louisiana. And the QDMA had a really nice after-hours suite after the event, and we're all having to wear sport coats and things like that. Guthrie had been drinking the brown water after the event, after he got done taking the photos, and he already knew that he was leaving. But we're sitting there having a drink, and it's kind of a cocktail hour, and there's about 10 people gathering around. Well, this very known, well-respected biologist walked up to Guthrie and said, "Guthrie, I got a bone to pick with you." And now Guthrie had several drinks in him. He goes, "Well," and I'm not going to mention his name, but he's still a well-known biologist. He said, I wrote that article, and he wrote a very scientific article about weeds growing in food plots. And Guthrie changed the name of his article to Winning the Weed Wars, as opposed to his very scientific name on how to use this type of herbicide to kill the scientific name. He goes, as a writer, I really don't respect you changing the name of my article. He said, oh, really? He says, well, let me tell you something. You could have published that in one of these scientific journals, and you'd have had 52 scientists somewhere in the country reading that. But no, I changed it so that we could have 40,000 people would take interest in what you were saying. And quite frankly, you're working for me. So that's the reason I changed it, and that's how it's going to be. And I went, oh, hell. So I literally just got a drink and went to the other side of the room. And, buddy, they got into it. The next day, Guthrie sobered up. He goes, oh, Hart, I might get fired over that. He said, I gave that smart son of a piece of my mind. I said, yes, you did. He goes, man, that Maker's Mark was talking to me last night. He goes, well, the good news is I can't get fired because I'm going to work for the NRA. And so anyhow, but that being said, they made up and they became good friends. But Guthrie was not scared in any setting to speak his mind, and the Georgia redneck would come out of him in a heartbeat. And yeah, he could be, he definitely was not scared to tell the CEO or tell somebody with a PhD that knew a lot more about the subject than Guthrie did. But Guthrie would tell him flat out, I know a lot more about English than you do. So
that's great. What a interesting combination of skill sets. And, I don't know what the average listener's assumption about a writer is, but I'm amazed hearing y'all talk at just how charismatic he must have been, to be able to command a room, to be able to make, people feel important. Like those are gifts. Those are not things you just figure out how to do. Those are not technical skills. Those are things you're God-given, talents, and to be able to do that and still write and handle all the things he did. What a cool story. What a cool cat.
And Spence, and for other listeners out there, there's a lot more stories that I know that the Rolling Thunder podcast is very much a PG rated podcast, but over a campfire or sitting around a bar at one of the trade shows, there's a lot more wild stories that are somewhat PG-13 that can be told too. And he was quite the character and quite the storyteller of those as well. So he was definitely a fun person to have at a trade show, or a fun person to have in a hunting camp after hours as well.
Well, in memory of Guthrie, I'm going on record as saying the next round of Maker's Mark is on me, and I'm expecting some of those stories. Well, man, thank you guys so much for your time, and I get a lot of enjoyment out of hearing stories like this. I mean, I know this is not forever ago. We're talking about 10 years recent history, but the outdoor industry has changed a lot in the last 10 years, and it's amazing just with social media how quick we forget things. And one thing that has stuck with me about Guthrie is just you guys, just like y'all, and y'all are not the only two. He obviously left an impact because you don't quit talking about him. And first time I heard about Guthrie from Hart was before you shot that turkey. I mean, it was about you were hunting with Guthrie's gun, and just that the stories just kind of snowballed until I guess the last story that I want you to tell, Hart, is you killed a turkey yesterday, right?
Yeah.
And
it was it's pretty cool. It was shot a turkey yesterday morning, and every year I've hunted on the date of his death, and this is the first year, his 10th anniversary. I got lucky. Shot it with a buddy of mine who randomly, the friends that I shot those turkeys with were people that I had met randomly through friends of Guthrie, and we all have mutual friends of Guthrie, and we're all on the same industry fantasy football team through a bunch of mutual friends. And yeah, it was a very one of those. It was not a traditional sit down at the tree and yelp them up Tom Kelly style, but it was a little more tactical in the way that Guthrie would have liked it. So yeah, it was good. And I made some posts yesterday on social media, and anytime there's a death, everybody grieves and mourns, and like, man, he's been gone 10 years, but man, we still think about all the fun times around him. He was gone too soon, but hey, we've grief in the morning's over. It's time to talk about a good man, and that's right. What's it's pretty special that truthfully 10 years later there's not a hunting camp or a trade show where I do not meet somebody at a trade show. Literally, I was at the Bassmaster Classic 3 weeks ago. Last trade show I was at, and I catch myself in a group of people in a trade show booth. 2 people walk up, and I'll introduce them, and I'm like, both of y'all were mutual friends with James Gutherie. And these people are now vice president of Costa Sunglasses and the vice president of a fishing rod company that met Guthrie 15 years ago through a completely different form of business. And so it's pretty neat to see the impact one person had really on the hunting industry and behind the scenes, and, just outside of his writing and outside of what he did to earn a paycheck. His network was just as vast as it could be in the hunting industry. And Spence, you've got a ton of friends in the waterfowl world. Like Kelly Powers and Guthrie were super tight buddies. He was using Kelly in waterfowl articles to, just a ton of folks.
When you're talking about these connections and you started telling those stories, I mean, what hit me was the trickle down of these things is still going on, because it was just 3 or 4 years ago that I needed Pete Angle to believe in a media project that we were doing that helped me, pay for some marketing that I needed to do with Josh Grossenbacher and a couple of those guys that we were hiring. And, that's 3 or 4 degrees removed, but that was a connection through you from Guthrie. And, anyways, just really, really cool to hear the connections just keep on going.
This just came up when you were saying that, Hart, and I forgot to tell you this story. So I've become friends with Cole Hauser, the Rip Wheeler character on Yellowstone, and become pretty good buddies, hunt together a bit. And he called me last year and said, hey, I'm doing this movie with Morgan Freeman, and do you want me to, I'm going to be a cop in it. Do you want me to have any special gun or anybody in the industry that you could help out with a gun, placement, blah, blah, blah. I said, yeah, absolutely. He goes, okay, I'll have the armorer call you. All right. So this armorer from Hollywood calls me, and we get chatting and talking about guns he's going to use and outfit him with and what's available. And he goes, well, you know a lot about guns. What's your background? I said, well, I'm a publisher of Guns and Ammo. And he goes, oh, yeah, I used to work with one of their top writers. And I go, who was that? He goes, I can't think of his name. He was a skinny, ball cap wearing Georgia kid. I said, Jay Guthrie. Absolutely, that's his name. And he was not aware that Guthrie had passed. I told him that. But yeah, it's funny that even in Hollywood, Guthrie was remembered. So.
Well,
good times. I really appreciate you reaching out to me, because it's I encourage all the listeners, and I post on social media that there's, when he passed, there's still plenty of stuff online that you can read about him and watch some videos. There's some neat videos on YouTube just to show the personality of quite a character. And he's quite a character that did a lot for the industry and was a pioneer, in many aspects of the industry that's just mainstream now. From the AR-15 platform to he was one that really helped popularize that, and amongst numerous other things.
Well, I can say I've thoroughly enjoyed listening to stories. I can continue listening to them. There's a lot of things you guys have said that are challenging. I mean, the just paying attention to people, like that's easy to gloss over that, but that's like one of the hardest challenges for me at these trade shows and interacting with customers is you want to make people feel important, and man, it's hard. That is just such a difficult thing. And then just also what I hear you guys saying that's challenging is, man, I hope a bunch of people sit around 10 years after I die.
Man, that's the exact same thing I was going to say.
Absolutely.
If 10 years after the good Lord calls me home, people talk about me half as well as y'all talk about Guthrie, I think I'll be just fine with that.
So, anyways, well, thank y'all for your time. Thanks for sharing stories about Guthrie with us, and just kind of giving us a window into the man, the myth, and the legend. And in a little way, I feel like I knew the guy. So,
yeah. Thank you for having us. It was fun.
Yeah. All right. Well, on that note, I guess we'll wrap it up and catch you guys on the next one. Thanks a lot for listening.
Absolutely. See y'all later.
Thanks, gents.
See you, fellas. Hey, y'all, this is Spence and Frawley, and just wanted to say thank you for listening to another episode of our podcast. We really, really enjoy producing this podcast and would be really grateful if wherever you get your podcasts, if you would subscribe to the Rolling Thunder Podcast and give us a 5-star rating. Somehow, apparently, out there in internet media land, that helps our podcast to be found by other people like you. So we just want you to know we appreciate you listening, and we'd like to ask you to subscribe and give us a 5-star review and keep on listening.
And unfortunately, recording podcasts don't pay the bills, so we just do this for fun and for y'all, and we want it to grow as bad as y'all want it to grow. So we could really use your help in doing that.
Share it with a friend.
Yes, right. We appreciate y'all stopping by again.
Thanks for listening.